We have breaking news in the ongoing legal fight over the ATF's pistol brace rule, and this one is sending shockwaves across the Second Amendment community. In a stunning 9-0 decision, the court has just delivered a massive defeat to the Biden administration, moving to permanently block the enforcement of the controversial pistol brace rule nationwide. This ruling not only shuts down one of the most debated firearm regulations in modern history, but it also sets a precedent that could stop future administrations from even trying to bring it back. Let's break down exactly what happened, why this ruling is such a major turning point, and what it means for millions of law-abiding gun owners across the country. Now, before we dive into the details, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and that your notifications are turned on. YouTube has a habit of randomly unsubscribing people from 2A content. So, double-check that button. It really helps the channel grow. And as always, thank you for supporting this space where we can still talk openly about your rights, your freedoms, and what's actually happening behind the headlines. All right, let's get into it. For months, the ATF's pistol brace rule has been under intense scrutiny. Originally introduced under the Biden administration, it attempted to reclassify millions of legally purchased pistol braces as short-barreled rifles, effectively turning ordinary gun owners into potential felons overnight unless they registered their firearms under the National Firearms Act. The backlash was immediate. Lawsuits were filed across multiple states, and several powerful organizations, including the Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, and others, joined forces to challenge what they called an unconstitutional abuse of regulatory power. Now, this 9-0 ruling we're talking about comes after a long series of legal battles that have been playing out in the background. Earlier this year, several courts had already issued temporary injunctions preventing the ATF from enforcing the rule while the lawsuits were being considered. But what just happened is far bigger, because this court didn't just pause enforcement. It struck down the entire rule permanently and went even further, blocking the ATF from attempting to reinterpret the same law in the future to achieve the same outcome. In other words, this isn't just a win, it's a firewall against future overreach. The judges were unanimous in their reasoning. They stated that the ATF had exceeded its statutory authority and had attempted to criminalize lawful conduct without congressional approval. The opinion emphasized that regulatory agencies cannot simply rewrite laws when they fail to get Congress on their side. This is something gun rights advocates have been warning about for years, the slow creep of agency power beyond what the Constitution allows. And in this case, the court finally drew the line. But what makes this decision even more surprising is that it was 9-0, a unanimous decision. In an era where nearly every major ruling is split down ideological lines, this shows just how far the ATF went in trying to stretch its authority. Even judges who are not traditionally seen as proud agreed that this rule violated fundamental principles of due process and separation of powers. That's an incredible statement in itself. Now, to understand why this ruling matters so much, we need to go back a bit. When the ATF announced the pistol brace rule in early 2023, it estimated that between 3 and 7 million firearms would fall under the new classification, though independent research suggested the real number could be as high as 40 million. That means tens of millions of Americans suddenly found themselves in legal limbo, facing potential criminal charges if they didn't comply within a short amnesty period. Gun owners and manufacturers immediately pushed back. They argued that the ATF had no authority to redefine firearms without congressional action, and they accused the agency of moving the goalposts on legal definitions that had been in place for nearly a decade. The issue quickly escalated into a broader constitutional debate about the limits of executive power. That's where the lawsuits began. The Mock versus Garland case became the centerpiece of this battle. And when the Fifth Circuit Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs last year, it sent the first big signal that the courts were losing patience with the ATF's legal gymnastics. However, the Biden Department of Justice appealed that ruling, and the fight continued. But something major shifted earlier this year when the new administration under Trump's DOJ took control of the ongoing appeals. Rather than continuing to defend the pistol brace rule, the new DOJ conceded that the Fifth Circuit's prior nationwide vacator could stand. That effectively meant the federal government was no longer defending the rule, a major shift in position. Still, other lawsuits remained open, and the big question was, would the courts make the block permanent, ensuring that future ATFs couldn't simply reward the same rule and bring it back under a new justification? That's exactly what this 9-0 decision answers, and it answers it decisively. According to the opinion, the court ruled that any future attempt to regulate pistol braces under the same statutory interpretation would also be unconstitutional without an act of Congress. That's critical because it closes the loophole the ATF has used for years, rewriting definitions through internal guidance or administrative rulings. Gun rights advocates are calling this a once-in-a-generation win for the Second Amendment. The Gun Owners of America, GOA, who were part of one of the main lawsuits, released a statement shortly after the ruling saying, "This is more than a victory. It's a message that government agencies cannot legislate from behind a desk. Americans have spoken, and the courts have upheld their voice. But this case is also significant beyond firearms. Legal experts point out that the reasoning here could affect other regulatory agencies as well. It's a signal that courts are growing skeptical of unelected bureaucrats creating sweeping new rules with criminal penalties, something that's been happening across multiple policy areas. The ruling cites the major questions doctrine, which basically says that if an agency wants to make a major change affecting millions of Americans, it needs explicit authorization from Congress. That doctrine has been used before, but this is one of the most forceful applications of it in recent memory. So, what happens now? Well, with this decision, the pistol brace rule is officially dead. Not paused, not pending appeal, but permanently blocked. The ATF cannot enforce it, and any previous enforcement actions under the rule are now void. It also means that owners of braced pistols can rest easy knowing they are no longer at risk of being criminalized for simply owning something that was legal when they bought it. However, that doesn't mean the battle is over. Some legal analysts believe the Biden administration may attempt to appeal to the Supreme Court. But given that this ruling was 9-0 and built solidly on constitutional grounds, most experts doubt it would get far. The political cost of pursuing a losing case in the highest court could be significant, especially in an election year. Meanwhile, state-level challenges are still playing out, and this federal ruling will have a ripple effect on them. Expect to see more state attorneys general citing this decision as precedent to block similar overreaches in their own jurisdictions. Now, let's talk about why this case has people so fired up. For years, gun owners have been warning that once the ATF could redefine accessories as firearms, there would be no limit to what they could regulate next. The pistol brace rule was seen as a test. If they could get away with that, then optics, triggers, or even certain magazines could be next. This ruling slams that door shut. It sends a crystal clear message. Rules cannot be rewritten at will to criminalize law-abiding Americans. And it's not just about guns, it's about accountability. For decades, we've seen unelected officials make life-altering decisions for millions of citizens without ever facing a vote. This ruling is a rare moment of balance being restored between the people and the bureaucracy. Now let's pause here for a quick moment. If you appreciate this kind of reporting, where we break down complex legal stories that directly affect your rights, consider subscribing and sharing this video. It's a simple way to fight back against censorship and make sure more Americans understand what's really going on behind the headlines. All right, let's get back to the legal details because they're fascinating. The court specifically cited U.S. v. Cargill, the landmark case where the Supreme Court struck down the ATF's bump stock ban as precedent. The reasoning was similar. Agencies can't reinterpret the meaning of machine gun or short-barreled rifle to expand their own power. That connection between the two cases makes this new decision even more bulletproof against future appeals. The ruling also notes that the ATF had failed to properly account for public input when finalizing the rule, ignoring over 200,000 public comments that overwhelmingly opposed it. The judges described this as a clear disregard for administrative fairness and said it demonstrated a predetermined political agenda rather than an objective rule-making process. That's unusually strong language for a court opinion, And it underscores how frustrated the judiciary has become with executive branch agencies that act without oversight. One part of the decision that's getting a lot of attention is the court's warning about future enforcement attempts. The opinion explicitly states that any attempt to reintroduce a similar rule through a slightly modified framework would be subject to immediate injunction. In plain English, if they try this again, it'll be blocked before it even takes effect. Gun rights groups are already celebrating the decision, but they're also urging continued vigilance. GOA and other organizations are encouraging members to remain engaged because, as they put it, the fight for the Second Amendment never truly ends, and that's true. And this ruling is a huge win, but it came after years of relentless pressure and organized legal action. The bottom line is this: the ATF's pistol brace rule is gone for good. It's been struck down on every major front: constitutional authority, administrative procedure, and public accountability. This 9-0 ruling doesn't just restore your right to own what you've legally purchased. It restores the principle that the law must come from the people, not from unelected bureaucrats. So tonight, gun owners across the nation have every reason to celebrate. The courts have spoken clearly, the Constitution has been upheld, and the overreach has been stopped in its tracks. As always, we'll continue following every update on this story as new details emerge. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video, leave a comment letting me know what you think about the court's decision, and share this with a friend who needs to hear the good news. And remember, this nation was built by free citizens who understood the power of liberty, and it will be maintained by those same citizens who stand up to defend it. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next.